Hey there, Jordan Chariton, live Status Coup, Tuesday, March 28th, the year 2023 in the United Corporations of America. Delighted to start the show with human rights attorney Stephen Donziger, who, for those who have been watching for the last couple years, has been fighting no other way to say it, corporate political prosecution against Chevron, who's dumped millions of dollars into fighting Stephen, to keeping Stephen under house arrest. Then Stephen was put into a federal prison. This went on for over 2 years, and Stephen has been nearly bankrupted and unfortunately disbarred due to Chevron. The brief summary, Stephen and others, through legal work, was able to win a $9.5 billion settlement against Chevron. Chevron, who contaminated the Amazon, specifically in Ecuador, contaminating land that made a lot of indigenous people in Ecuador sick, cancers, among other things. Instead of paying that $9.5 billion fine, Chevron decided to go on a crusade against Mr. Donziger and spend millions of dollars to do so. And this involved basically a U.S. prosecutor declining to go after Stephen, but the very rare occurrence of a judge then outsourcing it to a private prosecutor to go after Stephen that had ties to Chevron. And now this has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court that unfortunately yesterday declined to hear your appeal. Surprisingly, there was 2 dissents, and these were from the conservative justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. So let's start there. What was your initial response? Were you expecting a different result? And what did you think of the court's rationale for not accepting your appeal?
Well, thank you, Jordan. Good to be with you again. First of all, big picture is this case is actually about something a little bit different, which is the long-suffering indigenous peoples of Ecuador's Amazon who've been living in a terrorized state for decades because of Chevron's deliberate decision to dump billions of gallons of cancer-causing oil waste onto their ancestral lands, which is what our lawsuit was and is about. Because we were successful in that lawsuit and won a big judgment against Chevron to clean up the toxic waste that they left on these pristine areas of the Amazon and really ruined the ecosystem down there, they went after me in New York in a civil litigation trying to knock me off the case. And that resulted in something that this country has never seen before, which was a private corporate prosecution of me by a Chevron law firm in the name of the U.S. government, which resulted in my detention for almost 3 years. So it was that subset of the bigger case that I was appealing. And I took it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I do not believe what happened to me was legal under U.S. law, under our Constitution. You cannot let private parties, corporations, prosecute and detain people in our country or in any rule of law country. And because that happened in my case, I appealed it. And the court, they didn't consider the appeal and reject it. They simply refused to take the appeal. So they let stand a decision in one of our federal appellate courts in New York to let this private prosecution happen. And I think it's an outrage. So yes, I'm really disappointed. I think it's a direct affront to the rule of law in the United States. I'm not entirely surprised given the makeup of our court and the dominance of corporate interests now in our judiciary in ways I've never seen before in my life. But I'm still disappointed that the justices did not find it in them to knock out this obviously crazy idea of a corporate prosecution where corporations can directly go after people under our criminal laws and lock them up without the prosecutor agreeing or even being in the courtroom. That's dangerous. It's wrong. And that's what they targeted me with, and that's what the court essentially legalized yesterday by not taking my appeal.
And not to get too in the weeds, but just on the legal point, your argument kind of hinged around the appointments clause of the Constitution, on the theory that, you know, the courts appointing a special prosecutor violated that. Apparently, the Supreme Court, by rejecting your appeal, doesn't think so. Do you have any idea what their rationale is? Obviously, you don't agree with it, but that they seem to be flexible in terms of the appointments clause of the Constitution. And can you flesh out for people what that means?
Well, look, what happened to me was a federal judge, appointed a private Chevron lawyer to prosecute me. So the technical issue, look, there's thousands of people dying of Chevron's pollution down in the Amazon, which is why they went after me. That's the context. But the technical issue before the Supreme Court was really a separation of powers issue. It's who gets to prosecute under our system of government, under our constitutional framework. Judges do not prosecute crime. They preside over cases. Prosecutors prosecute crime. They don't judge cases. They prosecute. So the judge has his or her role. The prosecutor has a separate role. They're all in the same courtroom. In my case, the judge tried to not only be the judge, but be the prosecutor. And that's where it all broke down as far as the Constitution is concerned. I mean, a one man or woman cannot be judge, jury, and sentencer, you know, in the same case. And that's what happened. So it's a separation of powers issue. Look, frankly, I don't think the Supreme Court is the least bit comfortable with what happened to me. But for various reasons, I think mostly political, mostly because of Chevron's influence, they didn't want to give me, Stephen Donziger, anything, given my long track record of fighting for justice against a leading American company. So I think they were bothered by what happened to me. It's reflected, obviously, in the dissent signed by two of the justices. I don't think that overrode their separate interest in sort of keeping me in the idea of people like me down. That is, people who fight for justice successfully on behalf of people from other countries against our, you know, some of our major corporations. So there's a lot going on there. I think ultimately refusing to take my appeal is terrible for the rule of law, bad for our country, and reflects a deepening influence by, you know, the corporate structure over our court system. It's unfortunate.
And to some who are watching that don't know the whole history, I just want to zero in on one part that the court might say wasn't relevant to whether they hear it or not, but I think it's very relevant. I mean, there's evidence that Chevron paid a witness from Ecuador quite a lot of money to come over and allege that you had supposedly tried to bribe this judge in Ecuador, and they rehearsed him over 50 times to make these allegations and paid him, correct me if I'm wrong, $2 million to come over from Ecuador. So there's a lot of abnormal things, not just the hiring of a judge outsourcing to a private prosecutor with ties to Chevron, but the witnesses that they used who were excessively rehearsed and made quite a lot of money for testifying, alleging this against you. Did we lose Stephen? Hold on. I think his connection obviously wasn't good, but I think he might try to come back. Lost you. I think he's about to come back here. And smash the like button while we wait for him to come back. Before he comes back, let me just read the dissent here. It is actually Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, so the conservative judges. In dissent, Gorsuch, joined by Kavanaugh, wrote that, quote, however much the district court may have thought Mr. Donziger warranted punishment, the prosecution, quote, broke a basic constitutional promise essential to our liberty. So that was Gorsuch who wrote that. quote, in this country, judges have no more power to initiate a prosecution of those who come before them than prosecutors have to sit in judgment of those they charge, Gorsuch wrote. So that was the conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch. I don't know if you heard that, Stephen. But what I was asking before you cut out was about the witness, the judge from Ecuador that was paid and rehearsed excessively to come over here and make these false allegations against you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hear you.
So I'm sorry, Jordan, if you don't mind, just repeat the question.
I was pointing out obviously the Supreme Court
question?
didn't take this. The Supreme Court didn't take this into account, but obviously there was a witness, an Ecuador judge, who was paid quite a lot of money to come over, rehearsed over 50 times to make these allegations against you that you had supposedly tried to bribe the Ecuador judge, etc. So there were significant abnormalities on top of we lost them again. All right. Obviously, his connection's not great. I don't want to keep going in and out. So we'll try to bring him back at another time. Joining me now. Sorry about that, Steve.
It's okay.
What's your thoughts on this Donziger thing?
I'm shocked to hear Gorsuch write something that sounded remotely judge-like. So that was a pretty amazing write-up, actually, right there. I mean, he made a very bold statement. I wonder if it will hold true in other cases.
Oh, you know,
my goodness.
Real quick. I think I got him back. 1 sec. You there, Stephen? You there, Stephen? All right. I'm going to let him enjoy his life. We'll bring him back, hopefully not from his phone, to get a more in-depth. Yeah, I mean, listen, this is not shocking. It'll bleed into other topics we covered today. But live in the United Corporations of America, and the rules kind of change based on the politicians and judges and what their ties are. The judge who issued the outsourced the private prosecution to a bunch of chevron-tied lawyers who were also in bed with the Federalist Society, literally was, by any standard of the law, conflicted and shouldn't have been able to do that. But at the end of the day, like Stephen has said, the reality is we've been covering East Palestine, Flint, other things. People in Ecuador have never been made whole. People have died, high rates of cancer. And that's what he was fighting for. And that's frankly why Chevron went to holy hell. They could have paid the $9.5 billion, but like you and I have talked about in so many instances, they don't want to open Pandora's box. If you pay that settlement for this poisoning and they intentionally dump their waste in the Amazon in Ecuador, then you're acknowledging and inviting future lawsuits, because that's not the only place they're poisoning.
No, not at all, man. In fact, I think it's interesting to note that if you keep looking at the courts and thinking that they're on our side or they're our friends or whatever, I think it's important to harken back to the fact that it is the United Corporations of America and that they represent capital. They represent the wealthy. They represent landholders. They do not represent the rank and file people. They do not represent Mr. Donziger. They don't represent anything other than capital. And I think that we've seen this so many times that to expect different than that is a fool's errand. So I feel for the guy. I really do, because it's quite clear that he's done God's work out there, and it's quite clear that he's not going to get a fair hearing. It's quite clear that nobody that does that kind of work will get a fair hearing. So in my mind, devil be, we're in trouble. We're in real trouble. I think we're in trouble as activists too. I think there's so many ways that this is kind of pinching and getting worse and worse and worse by the second. And if we're going to be talking about guns later today, I think you're going to see even more of this. So strap it on, man.
Absolutely. And we'll try to get Donziger on, maybe even a little later. He's telling me he might be able to move in to a better location in a half hour. But for those of you that don't know, he's nearly been bankrupted from 3 years of house arrest, then federal prison. He's been disbarred. So go to freedonziger.com. Check out what he's working on, ways you can get involved. That's freedonziger.com. Steve, I feel like a 17-year-old has been apart from his girlfriend for months. You and I have been apart from each other. You were sick. I've been a new dad. You were on with Zaina. A lot of reasons. So we haven't done our usual gig. So a lot to get to. I want to get to East Palestine in a bit with you because we haven't been able to discuss it. But let's start talking about this Nashville gun shooting. You and I have responded to school shootings before, so some of this will be on repeat. But I guess from a journalistic and I guess just commentary point of view, I feel a little different now that I'm a father. I hate to say that because I did care before I had a kid, but it is different. It is different, just natural human nature when you're a parent to respond to these things. I know we've recently grown a whole lot of subscribers, and some of those subscribers might be more conservative. So you might not agree with me today, and God bless you if you don't, but I'm just going to keep it real. There is a sickness in this country. Just by the facts, this was at a private religious school in Nashville. The shooter was transgender. Obviously I want to be sensitive about the way we talk about this. Born a female. So born a cis female, transitioning to a male. To me, there are opportunists and anti-trans crusaders that are trying to make this about that. To me, there's no evidence that it's about that. The manifesto that this shooter, Audrey, wrote has not been released. As I'm going live, it hasn't been released. So if something changes, let me know, Colin. So we don't know all the reasons. Some of the reports have been she went to this school. So obviously there seems to be a connection between this school and her. But the bottom line is, as is coming out now, she bought 7 guns legally. 7 guns legally before she did this. So let me read the Associated Press story if you have it, Colin. The shooter who killed 3 students and 3 staff members at a Christian school in Nashville legally bought 7 weapons in recent years and hid the guns from their parents before carrying out the attacks by firing indiscriminately at victims, spraying gunfire through the doors. Violence Monday at the Covenant School was the latest school shooting to roil the nation and was planned carefully. The suspect, Audrey Hale, 28, was a former student at the school. Hale did not target specific victims, among them 3 9-year-olds and the head of the school, but did target this school, this church building. The police said Hale was under a doctor's care for an undisclosed emotional order and was not known to police before the attack. Based from what I read and saw before we came on, the parents thought that Hale had returned or got rid of her guns or got rid of her guns. I don't know if she sold them and wasn't aware that she still had several guns left. I don't know what caused her to do this. We don't have the manifesto. I think it's an easy layup for hateful people like Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, all the anti-trans crusaders to make this about a trans individual or claim that testosterone injections she was getting to transition to a male made her do this. There's no evidence of that. And I don't really think that's relevant because this is just one of many shootings. So you can't blame the transgender issue on the massacres in America. But at the end of the day, as is a problem that we have legal corruption in this country, and it is legal to bribe government officials in this country. It is legal to be a corrupt government official. It is legal to sell your Senate seat or House seat to the highest bidder. It's a problem that this person or any person is allowed to buy 7 guns in bulk. If you saw the video, I'm not going to play it, but if you saw the video of her shooting into this school from outside, you cannot do that with nunchucks. You cannot do that with a knife. I don't care what conservatives say. We got to harden the school doors and the school cameras and the infrastructure. You could harden it till you're blue in the face. You cannot beat semi-automatic weapons of war that the military, conservatives love the military, bow to the soldiers. They say have no place in civilian hands. And we could have a mental health conversation, but mental health, in my view, is a red herring. Mental health problems exist all over this globe, and they will, no matter how much resources are provided. And I think we could all agree we need to provide more mental health resources. There's additional mental health problems in this country due to the financial crash, COVID, income inequality, bullying. There's a whole mixed bag of things. But mental health, I had severe depression. I was hospitalized years ago. There's a lot of people with bipolar, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia who do not pick up guns and shoot. It's the guns. And I don't really, now that I'm a father, I didn't want to hear about it before. I don't want to hear about your Second Amendment that was written by a bunch of racist slaveholders back in the day that was for a militia and has been bastardized by the NRA. And to end my monologue, I don't have it, but the Washington Post actually did a pretty long piece about the history of the AR-15. I think it came out yesterday. The NRA used to hide AR-15s in the back at their gun shows. They almost used to be shamed by the AR-15 because they knew the military did not want these in circulation. So they kind of had them in the back at gun shows, but they weren't out and about. They only started pumping AR-15s when the gun manufacturers started pushing these. So AR-15s were not always in vogue. And lastly, the chart doesn't lie. This is the mass shootings. It's in there, Colin, if you have it. This is from Statista during the assault weapons ban of the 90s to 2004. There was 96 mass shootings. 96, deaths associated with mass shootings. 15 incidents. When it was repealed, I mean, it goes up and up and up. Obviously, over the last nearly decade, significantly worse. Steve, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm going to take a slightly different angle. You address the guns. We know that we have a slightly different view there, even though I've never owned a gun, folks. Let me just be crystal clear. And I'm a dad of 9. So let's get that out of the way. But what I want to talk about.
You're a dad of 10 now because of your puppies.
That's true. I got it. But, you know, he acts like he runs the roost, and no kid can run the roost. So he's got to be like an adult. Anyway, I want to focus on a couple things. Number one, I'm going to start with bullying. I don't know anything. We don't have the manifesto here. So this is all top of mind stuff, but I think it's important to bring out. And since we got a bit of a platform here, I'd like to make an opportunity to talk about this. When I was growing up, just me personally, I was a choir boy. I was a straight A kid. I was also in drama. I was Judd Fry in Oklahoma. But I also played football, and I played baseball, and I played golf. But kids were brutal in high school. Kids were brutal in middle school. And in elementary school, they were downright terrorists. And I remember this. I'm 53. I'll be 54 next week, actually a couple days from now, April Fool's Day. But within that space, I was terrorized, you know, and then as I got older, I got bigger, I got stronger, and I became the bully. Okay. These things happen. And I know that I went through a lot of therapy. I went through a lot of troubles as I look back at the way I was bullied in school. The first thing I thought of when you said that this was a religious school, this is a trans woman transitioned to a man, he shot into this school. And with that in mind, since we don't know what the manifesto says, etc., I could certainly appreciate the kind of impact that disgraceful bullying. And back then, I don't know how old this person is. How old? 20 what?
28.
28 years old. That's still young enough, or old enough, I should say, to have been before the zero tolerance on the bullying. And I'm telling you right now, the travesty of kids tormenting each other in schools has a lifelong impact on, like I said, I'm almost 54 years old, and I still remember every single thing they did to me. So that's not an excuse. That's just filling in some gaps there. The other thing that I think is really super important to note is, while I won't use the mental illness angle, because I think that's a red herring as well, I will use the alienation angle from the capital perspective. We have been screwed so hard with this economy. And this is not to say that there aren't people that have been screwed harder and made different decisions. It's not a matter of everybody's going to get hit. It's not the 100% rule. It's the point that this alienation is so severe that when you get someone that has perhaps a bullied past, this whole thing comes together. And I think that this is kind of a plague. This is a epidemic, in my opinion, the outcast feeling, that alienation that capital and neoliberalism has brought to America. You expect violence from this, whether it be gun violence, fist violence, domestic violence, kicking the dog violence. There is violence that comes as a result of desperation and depression and fear and sadness and absolute incapability of seeing future hope. So I don't know anything about this person. I'm merely projecting things that I know for myself and that I've heard from others. And as I think to myself about these kinds of events, is it the gun? I mean, yes, clearly we see the AR-15, we see the assault weapon. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to recognize the sharp spike in violence as a result of the accessibility to these kinds of devices. But I would like to say that, stepping back further, our battlefront, our battlefield has got to be focused largely, in my opinion, on the austerity narrative. The austerity narrative creates the kind of conditions that make these sorts of things happen in so many ways. I mean, little things like kicking the dog. I'll start kicking the dog all the way up to blowing up some kids in schools. This is not abnormal. So for me, I think to myself, there are, and I just watched the Waco documentary they did that exposed how shitty our police force and our ATF and our FBI act with strange people, with people that are odd and different. And you watched as
is that out yet? I saw a teaser.
It was fantastic, and yes, it is. It's very good. So I want to be clear that when you have people that are fearful or depressed or just desperate and completely despondent, this society, this world that we're in, creates people who have nothing to live for, who feel like they have plenty to live for if we were a caring, compassionate society that provided the basic needs for people. But when you don't have that, and again, I don't know that manifesto, may come back and make a fool out of me for saying what I'm saying right now, but I'm willing to hang out there on a limb because I know there's enough of these situations that what I'm saying has merit. So I think that it's important to definitely see the statistics on this AR-15. It's quite clear that they have been the direct result, the direct end gun, if you will, for many of these assaults. But I think it's super important to recognize the correlation between a shitty neoliberal economy, the desperation of people as they feel that axe chopping. And in this particular case, I can only imagine that this person was probably trans when they went to elementary school and they didn't know what was going on. They were probably trans in middle school. They were probably trans in high school, and they transitioned, etc. But that pain, that suffering that brought through, I thank God I haven't gone through that, but I can imagine the rage. I can imagine the impulse to want to off those people that bullied you. I can imagine that feeling, because I admit there was a time where I thought, God, the only way I'm ever going to be whole is to take revenge against these bullies. And thank God that didn't happen. And thank God I'm on the other side of it. But my point is that I don't think it's unreasonable to believe that people associate things like elementary school and the pain they suffer and the bullying they suffer and then go back and exact revenge. Am I right? We'll probably never know.
So we have a couple responses to get to that were pretty shameful, in my opinion, but I want to respond to that. First of all, just to, out of respect, because we want to obviously respect anyone who's transgender. I just think that's basic. I don't understand why people can't just call people the way they would like to be called, whether you're transgender or anything. If my name was Jordan, I don't want you to call me Jordy. I want you to call me Jordan. So just for purposes of respect, apparently she was born she, but went by he. So sorry for referring to it as she. So again, we don't have evidence that he was bullied. We don't have his manifesto. So the jury is out on all that. It seems to me if he went to this school and then years later shot up this school, 2 + 2 = 4. There's some connection, whether it's bullying or who knows. So we'll probably, we'll have more information pretty soon on that, obviously. But why I don't disagree with you, but from a bigger picture, if you live in a, let's say you live in a cul-de-sac, if you're lucky enough, or you live on just a straight block with 5 houses, and every house is on fire at the same time, your response isn't going to be, hey, we need to look into the infrastructure, or we need to look into, what set all these houses on fire at the same time, right? You're going to try to put the fucking fire out, and you worry about the bigger picture stuff later. That's how I view it. Right now, the next mass shooter is being radicalized or is planning the mass shooting for whatever reason, whether it's austerity, economic, societal, bullying, you name it, mental health, whatever the reason is, bad breakup, is just unhinged. They're planning it. And through loopholes or legal gun laws, they're getting, and it's not just the AR-15s, it's the high capacity magazines that allow you not to have to, you don't have to reload. So of course it's not a one size fits all problem. And if you just get rid of AR-15s, or you just get rid of high capacity magazines, or, people, I understand, gun enthusiasts say, well, you could patch things together, even if an AR-15 doesn't exist, to do damage. You might be right. But we have a common thread here over, 1999? So you're talking 30 years. Wait, 23 years. We have a common thread. And to me, now as a parent, what do we got? Almost 300 people watching. There's a good chance somebody in this audience watching right now could be somewhere, not just a school, supermarket, concert, mall, sporting event, and there's going to be a shooting. And to me, our politicians, they are corrupt. It's the pattern in every story we cover. Your top responsibility, whether you're the president, Congress, Senate, local, is the security and protection of the people you represent. They clearly don't care about that. They're clearly not going to take measures to protect us. So to me, I think we need to walk and chew gum at the same time. I very much agree with you that there are deeper problems here. If you look at most of these mass shooters, there is a lot of them are lower income. A lot of them come from single households, single parents. There are instances where there's economic struggle, societal struggle, mental health, and the connection between economic disparity. There is a connection, but we're not going to solve that tomorrow. But the mass shooting, the next mass shooting might be tomorrow, or it might be right now as I'm speaking. So that's why I think I don't give a shit about this bastardization of the Second Amendment. I care about my kids, my kid. I care about my niece and nephew. I care about your kids. And frankly, I'm not like a, erection for the American flag kind of guy, but you can't have it both ways, conservatives. You can't bow down to the military. We got to rule the world. We got to be the biggest, baddest, strongest military known to man. But then when the military tells you there is no place for these weapons in civilian hands, well, fuck you. You're just a bunch of, we don't care. Go die in Iraq or Afghanistan or Pakistan or Syria. You're not taking our guns. So, yeah, I mean, there's more information that will come out. But at the end of the day, yes, there's depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, multiple personality disorder, borderline person. I mean, there's a lot. But you're not going to have this carnage going, with a bow and arrow or a knife. Sure, there's instances where people get hurt or can get killed by stabbings, but not at this degree. And just watch the video. He shot in from outside with AR-15 semi-automatic military-style weapons. And at a certain point, This is not an issue about guns anymore. This is an issue. I don't care if you're progressive. I don't care if you're conservative. I don't care what you are. We are part of a human society. So you either care about other people's kids or you do not. You either care about other human life or you do not. Because I do not want to hear, I don't want to hear your concerns about children going to drag queen story hour if you're okay with children being massacred in schools. I don't want to fucking hear it. And by the way, I don't agree with your concerns about children going to drag queen story hour. Mind your own business. Okay?
Right.
You can't say parental rights. I'm cool with laws that forbid, anyone even announcing they're gay in school, but I'm going to dictate if parents can bring their kids to a show? No, you can't have it both ways there either. Mind your own business. Unless you have evidence that an adult is physically abusing their child, you might not agree with somebody's parenting choices, but it's their kid. It's not yours. End of day. Sorry for my monologue and rage.
No, you're good. Take one second.
I do want to show this Tennessee representative because this did happen in Nashville.
You got it.
So we could see the empty, hollow, corrupt, miserable fucks that are representing us. Colin, if you could play this Tennessee representative.
3 precious little kids lost their lives, and I believe 3 adults, I believe it's. And the shooter, of course, lost their life too. So it's a horrible, horrible situation. And we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals. And my daddy fought in the Second World War, fought in the Pacific, fought the Japanese, and he told me, he said, buddy, he said, if somebody wants to take you out and doesn't mind losing their life, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
It's a good bumper sticker. Not going to fix it. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I just really diving through what counter-revolutionary behavior is like. And I'm telling you, every action has an opposite reaction. So the question you have to ask yourself is, if you do X, how do you do Y? What do you do when Y occurs? And so ask yourself, given that I think the state of Texas alone, forget the rest of the country, just Texas, has more guns than, in fact, that was part of the Waco story. They have more guns per capita than anywhere in the world. It rivals a military, just the state of Texas alone. And now you go down there and all of a sudden conservative radio hears they're going to take our AR-15s. Now, all of a sudden, what's going to happen? And you just have to ask yourself, are you prepared? What are you going to do? What is your plan of action once the lunatic fringe decides they're going to march open carry right down the streets into your Starbucks with their long rifles like they did previously? And they're like, fuck with me, please. Let's fuck with me. And I worry genuinely, not that we shouldn't do something, but I worry genuinely. We have allowed this country to become such a fucking powder keg that the idea of trying to do something at this point, half-ass, mealy mouth, kind of halfway in, halfway out, dink and dunk here and there, I think it's going to create even more death. I don't know what that looks like, but I can tell you right now, the lunatic fringe that I'm around, I'm in central Pennsylvania, and these folks out here, their calendar is mapped by the hunting season. These folks have more guns than you would believe. So I can only imagine, that's a northern state. I can only imagine the massive amount of guns in the southern states and et cetera. What would happen? I don't know, but I can tell you they're more ready for what would happen than we are. And that's a guarantee. And so if you think about that, you have to ask yourself, what is your contingency to the counter-revolutionary behavior that would occur once you do that?
I think you bring up a great point. I'm not going to bullshit you, but I have an answer. But I also think at the end of the day, whether there was an assault weapons ban tomorrow or not, this country is a powder keg.
Yep.
With or without that. This country is a powder keg. We don't need to make it a big discussion about Trump right now, but we have seen a rise in white supremacy, domestic terrorism, anti-Semitism over the last 5 or 6 years. Just scouring the internet all day, and also my wife does this for a living. You think it's bad, you have no idea unless you scour the internet all day. The amount of attacks that are thwarted, the amount of hate out there. As I've told the audience, a lot of people didn't agree with me, but I'm always going to keep it real and be honest. I did not vote for Joe Biden because I like Joe Biden. I voted for Joe Biden because at the last few Trump rallies I was at, it was a very big difference from 2016 to 2020. Not that 2016 did not have hate. Obviously, there was significant hateful components of Trump. If you're a Trump supporter watching, sorry to tell you, I'm not a Trump guy. And, when you're calling for Muslims to be banned from the country and calling Mexican rapists and drug lords, you're not exactly, a peacenik. But what I saw was this kind of fever pitch, this hyena sizzling of hate, almost like I wasn't alive for it, but like at the old school KKK rallies. And I think that not that all Trump supporters are that's not what I'm implying, but there are white supremacists at these rallies. Flag drops. There were white militias at these rallies. Trump, saying I'm about to be indicted, but he's not been indicted. You got white powder being sent to district attorneys in New York, whether you agree with the potential indictment or not. 2 years ago, remember, something was sent in the mail to CNN, and I hate CNN, but we're not here advocating for violence. We have to beat people with our ideas, with our voices, with our organizing, with our activity, not with guns and powder and this and that. So I don't think I understand what you're saying, and there needs to be a contingency plan, or at least an attempt. But I don't think you could stray from doing what needs to be done to save lives for the long term because, well, the army's coming, the unofficial army with their guns. Well, Joe Biden, if he has the stones and the Democratic Party has the stones to do an assault weapons ban, which they can't do right now legally because Republicans have the House, they could have done it before. Then they need to figure that out. And you want to know what? I remember at the RNC in 2016, it was open carry, and there were people that I was interviewing with AR-15 strapped around their shoulder. I'm a human. I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't shitting my pants interviewing these people, because if you set them wrong, I mean, obviously they're walking around with AR-15s for a reason, either to intimidate or to look like they have a big dick or to start shooting. But at the end of the day, I think we need to do something. And there's no more. I don't want to hear anyone talk about it's time for a conversation. The time for a conversation was Columbine, Newtown, Aurora, et cetera, et cetera. Real quick, I want to respond to Santa's white kids, Megyn Kelly.
3 9-year-olds were shot down yesterday by one sick person, in addition to the 3 school administrators. There's something wrong with our society, and I, for one, am fucking sick of the knee-jerk. It's the guns, get the guns. We have 330 million guns, maybe over 400 million by some counts in America. They're not going away. We could do an assault weapons ban tomorrow. They're not going away, all right? We have to take a serious, honest look at what's wrong with us. We can take a look at what's going on in the case of this particular woman, trans person, she's a biological woman, and figure out what made this person crack. But we go through this every time. We try to figure out the issues that led to this person to do it or that person to do it, and then we change nothing. Okay, we change nothing. And I realize it's a big country and it's a free country and you're never going to be able to stop them all.
I can't listen to anymore. So she's sick of it. She's sick of hearing about the guns, but then says we do this every time and then nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
Well, why do you think nothing changes, Megyn Kelly? And by the way, you're talking about the country and it's a polarized country. Well, you might have had something to do with that being on Fox News for however long you were pushing, the Black Panthers are coming to get you and Santa's white kids and, pushing your George Soros bullshit and your Reverend White nonsense and all this stuff. I digress. But Megyn Kelly, her kids are probably in the best private schools known to man with the best security known to man. I'm back in her heyday. She probably had personal protection when she was at Fox News. I'm pretty sure I know where she lives, and it's very wealthy. Odds are her kids are fine and will be safe. But she's sick of it. And she had to get in that dig at, a biological woman, which, again, this is just one shooting. 99% of them have nothing to do with the transgender issue, which I even hate that phrase. I just find it obscene that the Megyn Kellys of the world exist, because it is gaslighting. It's like, oh, now's not the time. Oh, you're politicizing it. The bodies aren't even, the bodies are still warm. Well, what you say, nothing changes. Well, because you're advocating for nothing to change. Am I missing something?
You know what? I think honestly, at the end of the day, Jordan, until people start giving a fuck about each other in general, I don't see any way forward with anything. Period. You're not going to get anywhere because the Supreme Court will knock whatever you want to do down. They're not going to pass. They're not going to let it go. The Congress won't go, because even when the good guys, the Democrats, which I don't think are the good guys, but the good guys have the House and the Senate, they don't do anything. When they have the White House, they don't stack the courts or anything like that. They don't do anything. Really, the only thing we do is enter into proxy wars and stuff like that. So there's nothing fundamentally changing now, and there'll be nothing fundamentally changing later. This is the norm. They'll pay lip service to whatever it is for 5 or 10 minutes. And I'll just say this, and this is my final statement on this. I watch a dumb show in the mornings while I'm working. I listen to it more than anything. And it's from my old hometown in Washington, D.C., and it's a sports show. It's the Sports Junkies. And I listen to these guys, and I'm listening to them only because I want to hear DC sports talk. That's it. That's the only reason I listen to them. But 3/4 of the conversation is a bunch of wealthy white guys living in Ashburn, Virginia, which is extremely well-to-do, or Chevy Chase, Maryland, which is extremely well-to-do, Kensington, etc. These guys are living the good life, and everything they talk about, all the little innuendos between it, is always about how, well, this guy over here, he's not good enough, and he, it's all this right-wing thinking about. It's punching down. It's a constant punch down. Society as a whole punches down. So when we're looking at people and we're looking at society as a whole, we're looking at punching constantly. Everybody, it's always their fault down below. I think that until we change that, it doesn't matter how many guns you take out of people's hands. Right now, we're screwed. And it's getting worse, and it's getting worse, and it's getting worse. I mean, you go down the street. I think we talked about this. Doug Mastriano here in Pennsylvania, guy was running for governor. He actually had a few moments of clarity when he was talking about Norfolk Southern, apparently. But in reality, this is a guy who literally campaigned about, we're not going to let these woke motherfuckers basically in your community get away with it. It was like war against your neighbor. So this is rising up into the political realm at a higher level, obviously, since MAGA, but it's not just a Democrat or Republican thing. This is our society as a whole is a fucking powder keg ready to blow. It's individuals ready to blow, their lives ready to blow. Every step along the way, and people like Megyn Kelly get to sit there and wax poetic on on their programs and stuff like that, and act like they really give a flying fuck. In reality, at the end of the day, they're part of the problem. They're the ones punching down. They're the ones with the big mansions, living La Vida Loco. It's time to eat the rich and really mean it. Really take a good old bite out of them, and really start taking our fucking country back. Right now, I don't see any path forward until we as people decide to see each other as people and move forward. It's hard because a lot of people are really fucking assholes, and you want to punch them. You want to shut them down. But the fact is that we have to deal with assholes to move forward. And we got to remember that our battle is against the people that are oppressing us, not each other. And if we can fucking change the gaze where our eyes are looking, maybe we have a shot, because I don't see any way around it. I don't.
I think bigger picture, and I think it's a good way to end this topic. Whatever side of the issue you're on, I hope we all agree there's something very, very wrong in a representative democracy. There's something very, very wrong in a representative democracy if for 25 years, we're not talking like a recent string of things here. For 25 years, there has been a constant issue of life and death proportions. Remember the 60 killed at a concert in Nevada?
Oh, yes.
there's something very wrong with your system, whatever you call it, democracy. I don't think we have a democracy. I think it's just bumper stickers and Hallmark cards at this point. There's something very sick and rotting, what Chris Hedges calls late-stage capitalism. When your
now we're
government
talking.
allows that to persist, the mass death, and does nothing. Whatever you think they need to do, maybe you don't agree with me on the gun port, or you agree more with Steve, or whatever you think. Something's not right if your government can't respond to that over decades, and it just continues to happen over and over and again, not just in schools or concerts, but grocery stores, politicians getting shot. Remember Gabby Giffords? And I think capitalism is a major part of it, because I have to think, look at New Zealand. They're not awash in corruption and money parading around and buying their politicians. There's one mass shooting, guns are gone. Of course, we're much different than New Zealand. Different planet in terms of culture and guns, but that's how a government that is not purchased responds. Maybe you think they responded too far, but at least the government responded, whether it be too little or too much. The same things in other countries in Europe. They generally respond when there's things like this. Our government has basically said, that's the cost of freedom. Well, I am not okay with that being the cost of freedom. I don't know about you, but I'm not okay with it. I know you got to go soon, so I wanted to do one more topic.
Let me give you one statement, then we can go. Just remember, Engels said way back yonder that austerity is social murder.
Steve,
yes.
What do I always tell you?
Tell
the masses who the fuck you're talking about. Who the hell is Engels?
Engels was the BFF, the German BFF of Karl Marx.
Okay.
And he was a great writer, great theory, brilliant man. And he made the bold statement that I think carries weight in the year of 2023. And that is that austerity is social murder. And when you commit social murder, people die, literally. There you go. Austerity is social murder, and austerity is the world. We're getting attacked by three things right now: interest rate hikes, fiscal cuts to spending, and trying to lay people off. This right here is the makeup for the social murder that he spoke about. So I would expect things to get worse in the coming months as the impact of the interest rate hikes today goes out. I called it a lagging indicator the other day, but I'm telling you, it's gonna get worse. That's my end. There you go.
And Steve, real quick, because I have, fortunately, Steven Donziger is able to join us back. I wanted to ask you, because we haven't talked about it yet, your thoughts, obviously an open kind of big question. 53 days after a town had a train bomb detonated over it. The whole town is sick. Don't believe the media. Nosebleeds, dizziness, nausea, chemical burns, people... literally, I've talked to people who are fainting, and nothing's being done. Norfolk Southern's jerking them around. The EPA is saying, hey, our testing is fine, even though people are sick, even though independent testers are showing high levels of dioxin. Biden hasn't visited. The governor of Ohio has not declared a state of emergency. If he declares a state of emergency, you'd have the EPA with more resources. You'd have FEMA in there. We have the money. Norfolk Southern definitely has the money. They could permanently relocate every single one of these residents. They don't want to do that for the same reasons we talked about the first story. Or Chevron doesn't want to do it. If you set the precedent of actually corporations providing for people they poison, they're going to have a long line of people coming next, expecting them to do the same thing. But your thoughts on East Palestine from the perspective of it's another community poisoned. It's been normalized. Nothing's being done.
You know, we had this kind of discussion with Zainab and I. One of the things that I crack up about is wherever there's a parliamentarian style blocker, right? This act that somehow or another prevents the federal government from declaring it an emergency or a natural disaster or whatever, you know what I mean? At some point in time, it wouldn't take much if the federal government really wanted that to happen for them to send the freaking black shirts into Ohio and find somebody, get them to file a lawsuit locally or whatever. I guarantee you they could put the heat on this governor. They could do whatever. They don't want that, because the minute that they do that, everybody will start doing it. And so their goal here is to pretend like it doesn't exist. And I say, fuck that. I think our federal government, I don't care what this law is, there is a way around it. Our government finds ways to invade countries that we've done nothing to, or they've done nothing to us. We find ways to destabilize countries, to start coups. We find ways to do all kinds of stuff. You mean to tell me our federal government is so feckless and incompetent that it can't make some fucking governor in Ohio declare his own state a natural disaster and have the government FEMA come in there? I call bullshit. That's just my take.
Tell people who are unfamiliar with you, because we have a ton of new subscribers, fortunately. Where can they find you? You are a co-founder of The Real Progressives. Tell people where they could find you and support you.
Yep. So I do a show Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon called The Rogue Scholar. A lot of talk about Marxist stuff and thinking about socialism and how we're going to go forward, and where, what the implications of things might be if you do X, Y, Z. Also a heavy focus on economics. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Eastern time, 12 noon. And then Saturday mornings, I release a podcast called Macro and Cheese. We're coming up on our 218th episode here this week. It's going to be fantastic. Please check it out. You can find that on anywhere where podcasts are housed, and you can also find it on our website, realprogressives.org. Under the media dropdown, you'll find all of the podcasts that I've done. And of course, I'm here with Jordan. And thank you, Jordan. I've missed you too, brother.
Absolutely.
All right.
We'll have to do a longer show next time. Thank you, sir.
You got it. Take care, everybody.
We will be bringing Stephen Donziger back when he's ready. So looking forward to that. I think he is ready, actually. Let's see if we can bring him back. Hey there, Stephen.
Hey, good to see you, man.
All right. Got your connection back. So let me restart real quick. I wanted just to get your initial response. I know you're not super surprised, but at least I was a little surprised by the two conservatives who dissented, said that your appeal should be heard. That was Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. And they stated that I'll just read the quote here. Gorsuch wrote, quote, "However much the district court may have thought Mr. Donziger warranted punishment, the prosecution, quote, broke a basic constitutional promise essential to our liberty. In this country, judges have no more power to initiate a prosecution of those who come before them than prosecutors have to sit in judgment of those that they charge." What was your response to that?
Well, I totally agree with Justice Gorsuch. I mean, look, I've been very critical, as you know, of the Supreme Court, a series of decisions over the last couple of years since Amy Coney Barrett got on the court, and, Trump, made 3 appointments. It's just not been good for our country in many respects. However, in this instance, Justice Gorsuch nailed it, and what's interesting about that is what Chevron and Judge Kaplan, who has really orchestrated this whole private prosecution, this unprecedented corporate prosecution of me, I don't think they ever anticipated we would be able to, put together the legal team, very able lawyers who took it this far into the court and really prompted them to engage in a serious debate over what happened to Steve Donziger, who's a guy who's been, I've always told members of my team there's like the Donziger exception to the rule of law in the United States. Like it's impossible for me to win. Every law that protects me gets discarded or broken by courts in order to help Chevron, crush the indigenous peoples of the Amazon who I represent and with whom we won this historic pollution judgment. So, I wanted, look, my personal philosophy is to test the system. I don't expect much from the system, but, we cannot ever take rule of law for granted. And I think by raising these critically important legal issues, the system has to deal with itself. And I think that, to his credit, Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh, no matter what you might think of them in the other contexts, really stood for the principle in this case of the rule of law. You know, that under our constitutional framework, one man, in this case Judge Kaplan, cannot be judge and jury and sentencer and executioner in the same case. And that's what he did. I'll remind people that this, you know, I helped indigenous peoples win this $10 billion pollution judgment. Chevron went after me and convinced Judge Kaplan without a jury to find me guilty of various crimes related to fraud, which have been rejected by multiple appellate courts in Ecuador and Canada. And that whole case to me was based on Chevron's false evidence. Be that as it may, they then, when that didn't work, when that didn't silence me, they then went after me, claiming I had to give them my computer and my confidential information, my confidential file. And when I appealed that order, Judge Kaplan charged me with criminal contempt of court. Unprecedented in the history of our country to charge a lawyer with criminal contempt of court for properly litigating an order, a court order. And that ended up, that case ended up getting completely rejected by the executive branch prosecutor, that is the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan. And then that's when the things went really off the rails. Judge Kaplan appointed a private lawyer to prosecute me in the name of the U.S. government. But not just any private lawyer. He appointed a private lawyer from a Chevron law firm. Basically, he empowered Chevron to prosecute me in the name of the U.S. government, that is the same company against whom I had just won a $10 billion civil judgment. So it's just wrong on 1,000 levels. The fact the court didn't take my appeal and is letting it stand, I think, is awful for the rule of law. It's really surprising to me that it was only Justice Gorsuch and Kavanaugh who were very clear about how wrong this is and how illegal it is. I'm surprised the other conservatives, you know, Alito, Clarence Thomas, John Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett didn't join them. And I'm really shocked that the three liberals, the so-called liberals, you know, Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, also didn't join them. I mean, if those three had just joined Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, they would have accepted the appeal and my conviction would have been thrown out and the rule of law would have been reinstituted as regards private criminal prosecutions. So, you know, I'm happy that Gorsuch and Kavanaugh wrote, I thought, a really well-crafted dissent. I am incredibly disappointed in the other justices. I really felt like this had the potential to be a 9-0 decision in my favor because it's so outrageous what they did. And I really don't take great comfort in the situation, given the fact that this is now legal. Private corporation prosecutions are now legal in the United States of America because of the court's failure to act. And trust me when I say this, the fossil fuel industry, Chevron, Exxon, all the big companies, the pipeline companies, the railway companies, Norfolk Southern, for example, they are all chomping at the bit to follow this model to try to criminalize people who try to hold them accountable for their malfeasance, their pollution, and their misdeeds. And what Chevron did in this case, abetted by judges, now endorsed by the U.S. Supreme Court for all intents and purposes, was to try to criminalize First Amendment protected advocacy. That's my job. I'm a lawyer. I advocate. Just because we were, I think, too successful and put billions of dollars of Chevron's money at risk because of the case that we won. And by the way, that money is still at risk because even though I'm in this difficult situation, the judgment won by the communities in Ecuador still exists and is still enforceable against Chevron's assets anywhere in the world but the United States.
Yeah, that was my next point. It seems like this sets up a really dangerous precedent. I think of a company like Norfolk Southern right now that's going to have a massive class action lawsuit against it. Obviously, that's in America rather than Ecuador. But based on what the Supreme Court just did, it seems like companies already have mechanisms to delay for a decade in court. They have an army of lawyers, but now it seems they have precedent to go after the lawyers prosecuting them on behalf of poisoned people. And unless something dramatically changes on the court, like you said, this is now the playbook corporations are chomping at the bit for.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the playbook has a number of component pieces. But the one I really want to point out is when these companies know they're going to lose on the merits of the claims, like there's no way Norfolk Southern, in my opinion, can prevail in a neutral court based on harm caused by its derailment and its chemical detonation, what I would call a nuking of a town. They're just not going to win, and they know it. So rather than pay the tens of billions of dollars, which at a minimum it would cost to deal with that problem, maybe hundreds of billions, they will try to hire a bunch of lawyers who will bill them substantial sums of money, but far less than what they would pay to actually address the problem. And they will sit there and try to delay and delay and delay. And they will also try eventually to focus whoever the effective lawyers are on the other side, they'll try to knock them off the case by claiming they committed fraud, or they might try to get them disbarred because some discovery issue. And they will try to pressure them to leave the case. And if that doesn't work, they'll up the ante like they did with me and try to criminalize them with false evidence or whatever means they can use. Now, this strategy doesn't work with fair judges. I want to be very clear about that. In my case, I had a very biased judge who looked like he was working hand in glove with the Chevron lawyers, and I think he was. Not all judges are like that. I would say most judges are not like that. But what I have found is pretty much all judges are really susceptible to the influence of power, particularly corporate power. And even if they try to be neutral, it's you're always fighting an uphill battle. And I would say that the Supreme Court failing to act in this clear case of illegality by Chevron and Judge Kaplan is empowering the corporate playbook, so it feels emboldened and will try to use this again if needed. I mean, usually most lawyers drop out before it gets this far, before you have to jail them. I kept going for various reasons, mostly because I take my ethical duties to my clients really seriously, and I knew people in Ecuador just hurting and hurting. They're still hurting, and without me, they would have very little, if any, hope. I kept moving, I kept working. And because I and my colleagues, several other lawyers as well, were working on this case, were effective and successful and won the case, they tried to destroy the case by destroying the lawyer, me. And, again, I want to be clear. I served 993 days in detention. I was never convicted of a crime in any kind of proper way. I never got a jury. I was never prosecuted by the government. I was never indicted for a crime. It was all out of this pro-Chevron judge charged me and appointed his friend, a private lawyer who worked for Chevron, to act in the name of the government. And it's just blatantly illegal, a violation of separation of powers. As Justice Gorsuch pointed out in his, again, beautifully written dissent, judges don't prosecute crime in America or in any rule of law country. That's an executive branch function. That's the prosecutor's function. Just like a prosecutor who charges a crime doesn't sit as the judge in the case that he or she is prosecuting, a judge cannot actually prosecute a case where he or she is judging. And Judge Kaplan did all those functions in one case. And that's where the whole thing went off the rails. It's a terrible precedent. I'm really disappointed in the court. I'm especially disappointed in the three liberal justices because we had the votes. All they had to do was do the right thing. And I'm really bewildered as to why they didn't step up.
Last question, broader than your case. I don't know. I don't have a lot of reverence for the rule of law in America because I've seen that there's a lot of different legal systems for different classes of people. But it seems like it's at a different level now. The legal problem in this country when what happened to you. You look at what's happening in Georgia right now, where just protesting to defend a forest against a militarized police compound is leading to people exercising the First Amendment being jailed for domestic terrorism, and literally dozens now in prison in jail for weeks and not being released on bond, or having bonds set at extremely high costs over protesting Cop City. And of course, police killing an environmental protester in January, Tortuguita, where a private independent autopsy showed that it seems both his hands were up. At the time he was shot 13 times. And police have provided zero evidence that supports their claim that Tortuguita shot first. I wanted to ask you about, I mean, literally people are getting charged in Georgia for the equivalent of jaywalking with domestic terrorism.
Well, what's happening in Georgia is a complete abuse of power by elected officials and local prosecutors, the governor, the attorney general, the state, the police. I'm hard pressed to remember in at least recent U.S. history such a complete, abominable, rogue, so-called official law enforcement operation to try to intimidate people and undermine their constitutional right to protest. I mean, basically, there's a conspiracy in Georgia, and I would argue it's a criminal conspiracy, but it doesn't involve the Cop City protesters. It involves the police, the law enforcement, elected officials, and the prosecutors who are falsely charging them based on no evidence with terrorism, and then denying them bail, essentially locking them up without trial, locking them up without their ability to defend themselves, with the goal of intimidating people so they don't protest. That's illegal under the Constitution, under international law. And I really believe those carrying out this conspiracy in Georgia against the peaceful protesters of Cop City ultimately will be held accountable. And it might take a long time, but this is a sad, sad chapter in the history of our country. I think Georgia is a laughing stock in the eyes of the world. They're making themselves and our country look terrible around the world. Look, I'm under no illusion about the United States and our history. I mean, I'm reading a book now called American Midnight by Adam Hochschild about suppression of civil liberties during World War I. You know, attacks on the labor movement, on the Wobblies, the IWW. I mean, we have a long history of this kind of thing. And what I would argue, if you sort of put what happened to me, what's happening in Atlanta in the same framework, I would say what's really happening is the system, the contradictions of our political and economic system are becoming so acute right now that the elites feel very, very threatened. And when elites feel threatened and their privileges are threatened in this country, there's always a huge and ferocious attack on workers, on free speech, on protest. And you're seeing that right now. I mean, to get more specific, the fossil fuel industry is under enormous pressure. Yes, profits are at an all-time high, but they know the time is coming near where they're going to have to phase out their entire industry. And they are angry about it, and they're going after anyone who gets in the way of their ability to make super profits right now, because they're so angry at the fact that they're not going to be able to exist in a few years. You know, Chevron's anger at me for doing my job effectively and helping indigenous peoples hold them accountable was just off the charts. I mean, I've always functioned professionally as a lawyer, and they were like yelling at me and acting like children, and lying and making up evidence. You know, they're a company, an oil company, publicly listed. So, you know, there's a lot of anger out there among the elites, the oligarchy. What's happening in Atlanta, you know, is coming largely from the police, who are used to impunity and who, you know, eat up a massive amount of the city budget of Atlanta, while poverty is rampant and people lack basic services, housing, and healthcare. And they want to maintain their privileges. And the very courageous protesters down in Atlanta who are exercising their constitutionally protected free speech rights are in their way, building this ridiculous, misguided police training complex. And they're angry just like Chevron's angry. And they're going after them with a ferocity that, again, I have not seen in recent history of this country. I actually believe that, and I hope this will happen, I believe the Cop City protest will go down in history as a pivotal moment in this country, because we are at a major crossroads right now in terms of saving the planet or not. And that movement brings together, the campaign against Cop City brings together two key components of the progressive movement, which is climate and criminal justice reform. And they're all happening in one campaign. And I'm just astounded at the intelligence, the sophistication, the courage, the leadership of the kids, mostly young people down in Atlanta, who continue to fight to protect the forest down there, the precious forest, and to prevent this completely wasteful expenditure of resources. I love what they're doing. I pray for those in jail. It's not easy to be in jail, particularly when you're in jail without trial on bogus charges. The judges who actually are going along with this should be ashamed of themselves. So should Sherry Jackson, who's the DeKalb County prosecutor, who knows better. This is all just a political weaponization of law to shut people up in violation of the Constitution. And ultimately, I believe the people who are being targeted will prevail in this battle, but it's going to take some time.
Stephen, how can people help you? I know, obviously, you're not detained anymore, thankfully, but obviously you've had a lot of bills when it comes to your house arrest and then being in federal prison. And now, you're earning a living has been challenged through being disbarred. How can people help you as far as, I know, freedonziger.com, but what are you working on now, and how can people help you? Because I'm sure you still are in need of resources.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I have been deprived of my ability to earn a livelihood through my profession. I'm dependent on my legal defense fund money we raise to pay my basic expenses and also to do my work. So if people want to help, I'd love it if you could. We've had our basic fundraising model is high volume of small donations, sort of like Bernie Sanders campaigns. And you can go to freedonziger.com. There's no amount too small to give. If you give $1, $5, $10, we love you just the same as if you gave 10,000. Give what you can if you want to help. There's a donate button. And on the website, you can read about our work. I mean, we're engaged in a bunch of initiatives. And I'll say that in light of the Supreme Court's refusal to overturn my private prosecution, we are now launching an initiative, although we're putting it together, and I haven't really announced the details yet, but I'll just mention it here, to go to international fora, courts, to hold the U.S. government accountable for its violations of the rule of law, binding international human rights law that applies domestically in the United States for various legal reasons, but is consistently ignored by our courts. So we're going to have a major international initiative to protect me, protect our team, so that we can continue to work to help the indigenous and farmer communities of Ecuador's Amazon collect the judgment that Chevron owes them. So that's the main thing we're going to work on. We need money. That involves lawyers, travel, and, serious work by a team of people. So if you can help, again, please go to freedonziger.com. The battle is not over. Even though I was freed from house arrest after almost 3 years, there's nothing to stop them, particularly in light of the Supreme Court decision, from initiating another contempt against me and try to do it all over again with the same private prosecutor. So I live in I and my wife and my son, who's now 16, Matthew, we live in a constant state of peril. I mean, we were able to maintain, or we try to maintain a degree of normalcy in our lives to the extent that we can, and I think we're pretty good at it, particularly trying to protect our son. But you know, you never know when something could happen, and it could be one moment to the next. Someone shows up at your door and serves you papers, and
Think we lost your audio there at the end. Yeah, we lost your audio. Okay. Thank you so much, Stephen. I think we got the website out there and all that, and we'll talk again soon. So that was Stephen Donziger. Sorry about the connection problems, but I think the second interview we had, obviously you could hear him a lot better. Yeah, I got to tell you, it's days like this. It's really it's not easy. It's not easy as a journalist when you cover these things, because we're not covering the horse race. You know, we're not covering who's up and who's down among Democrats and Republicans. We're not covering, you know, the 2024 GOP horse race, Trump versus DeSantis. We'll cover it a little bit later, but we're covering real shit. You know, we're covering poisoned communities, corporate corruption, human rights lawyers being imprisoned for representing and scoring victories for poisoned people in Ecuador, the Supreme Court abandoning the rule of law, and mass shootings. And at a certain point, it's just depressing. It's depressing covering all these things. And sometimes you feel like, what's the point? Nothing's going to change. But we got to keep fighting, whether you're an activist, a journalist, a resident, a community member, a resident, because if we quit, we're just accepting our fate as the victims of the United Corporations of America. So at the very least, I'm happy that Stephen is free and has been free for over a year. But obviously, you know, check out his website, freedonziger.com. If you could support him at all, that would be great, because I think Stephen is someone to be admired. He's fought the good fight. He could have given up. He could have given in, handed over his laptop and his client information and his communications with his clients to avoid house arrest and jail time. But he has integrity and he has principles, and he didn't. And as a result, was 993 days. 993 days. He was under house arrest and then federal prison for, I believe, 2 months. And he was under house arrest during COVID. Well, you know how it felt during the beginning of COVID when most of us weren't leaving our house, but at least you could leave your house for a walk or something like that. And you were probably still going crazy, even if you could leave your house. He was under house arrest. He couldn't leave his house other than doctor's appointments. So thank you, Stephen. We'll stay in touch and follow developments. If you missed my live stream earlier, definitely check out our live stream from earlier today, where we responded to the absolute joke of a congressional hearing that took place earlier on East Palestine. We're going to continue covering East Palestine. For those that are watching who are not yet Status Coup members, by the way, welcome new Status Coup member Lori just signed up. So Lori just signed up. Also earlier today, C signed up. I don't have the full name. It just says C. So that's 2 new members, but we need to sign more people up. And I'll tell you why. We want to send Lewis back to East Palestine. I'm planning on going to Flint next month. When I'm in Michigan, I'm also planning on going to Kalamazoo, Michigan. If you watched our stream yesterday, it's not the same as East Palestine, but there is toxic air pollution that is poisoning Kalamazoo, Michigan, a poor black neighborhood. But that toxic gas is now moving to the white neighborhood. So the poor black folks are getting poisoned, and now the white folks are getting poisoned by Graphic Packaging, a major corporation, a billion-dollar paper mill. You're starting to see a pattern of communities being poisoned and the government not doing anything. So I want to continue to cover Flint while I'm in Flint, but also cover East Pals, cover what's going on in Kalamazoo on the ground. All of these things cost money. Between sending Lewis, this would be Lewis's third trip to East Palestine, sending me to Flint and then Kalamazoo. We've got some other stories we want to go on the road for. It costs thousands of dollars per trip between reporter, cameraman, flight, hotel, rent-a-car, food, gas, whatever. All these costs add up. We're also right now trying to purchase another live view. If you don't know, live view is our equipment, which we use when we're on the road to go live. The one we have right now costs us $25,000. You help pay for that. That's the top of the line live view that we could go live. That's why, for the most part, when we're live on the road, it's clear. There's not connection issues, but that costs a lot of money, that unit. We're trying to get another one where we don't have the money. Unfortunately, we don't have the money to get another top of the line live view, which costs at this point probably $26,000 or $27,000 because now it's 5G. But we're trying to get like the second or third level live view that we could use on the road, because we're trying to cover more things around the country. But we only have one live view unit, and we got me up in the Northeast, and Colin's going to be back in Texas, and John Farina's up here. But if Colin's on the road, for example, with Lewis, the live view is with the current live view we have is with me up north. So we're not mailing a $25,000 live view, continuing to mail it. You know, we need another live view. So please support us if you can. That's statuscoup.com/join. I'm a broken record, but $5 to $10 a month. $5 to $10 a month. If you don't have the extra $5 to $10 a month, I understand. You know, we don't want to make your situation any worse, so don't worry about it. If you do have $5 to $10 a month, there is a lot of outlets asking you for money, and they're basically all bullshitting and talking about the same shit as each other. So please support us. Statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 a month. It makes a huge difference. Let me read some super chats. Dave L., $20. The Second Amendment is only 28 words long, and the phrase well-regulated militia occurs before the word arms. There's nothing in the Federalist Papers, correspondence, or history suggests it was meant as a check on government. Yes, the Second Amendment has been bastardized and reinterpreted to fit what the gun manufacturers and the NRA wanted to mean, and radical right-wingers, not what it actually was written and intended for. Thank you for the $20. Fly, Champa, fly, $2. Yes, the bullying was brutal for me too. A lot of these school shootings have a lot of reasons, but social isolation, bullying, lack of friends in school is one of them. Humorous, $50. Thank you so much. Here's a law that no one seems to have the intelligence to think of in our government. No weapon of war or what is sold to SWAT in this country can be sold to the general public. Only weapons of protection or food can be sold to the general public. From your lips, if there is a God's ear. Couldn't agree more. Thanks as always, Humorous. I really appreciate it. Double K, $49.99. Holy cow. Thank you so much, Double K. Like Humorous. Continued supporter. I very much appreciate it. And if, by the way, if there's anyone out there that wants to just give us $25,000 with no strings attached so we could buy another live view, you could email me, info@statuscoup.com. But no strings attached. I'm not holding my breath. But if anybody wants to donate a big chunk of change so we could get the equipment we need, please, statuscoup.com/donate. Statuscoup.com/donate. If you donate anywhere close to $25,000, I will personally email, I will personally call you, and I might come and fluff your pillow. If you give us that chunk of change. Tony Dallas, $5. The bullying is a little worse with the internet and social networks. The bullying and humiliation doesn't stop after class. It comes home. I agree. And honestly, I don't want to sound like an old boomer because I'm not, but I do think social media has a big part of the issues of mental health in adolescents and children. You look at isolation. you look at issues kids are having related to social media. It's all connected. I'm not saying get rid of social media, but it is certainly connected. It is certainly connected for sure. Fly chopper fly, $2. We're still too close to our Evo caveman roots. Yes, I agree. Fly Rich, $2. Super sticker. Thank you. Fly chopper fly, $2. This with Cop City protesters charged as terrorists. It's a sad day. New YouTube member Lori Smith. Thank you, Lori. That's my mother's name. Thank you, Lori. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Harrison, $9.99. Keep up the good work, Jordan. And you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Colin, behind the camera. I'm a little tired because I was live twice today and everything that went into both live streams. Again, if you want us, I will beg you, if you want us on the road and to stay on the road and to be able to cover more and for Lewis to be on the road more and me on the road and to expand and to be able to pay Ron, Tina, Kim, Zaina, Colin, Lewis, John Farina, myself. It's very simple. StatusCoup.com/join, $5 to $10 a month. We are willing to be out there. We are willing to be in the trenches for as long as it takes. Just help us find a way to do it. StatusCoup.com/join. Thank you so much for watching and have a great